Hey guys, Wadox Studios here, and today we are gonna have some fun. Back at you with another reaction video. This time we're going over UE5, The Future of Gaming They Will Not Tell You, or They Won't Tell You, by Dallas. I've covered a video that Dallas went over in the past. Great dude. I do recommend subscribing to his channel if you'd like to know design and artistry pipelines and some optimization tips for like lumen and nanite optimization within UE5. But the thing that I'd like to go over here is the title of the video. It kind of gets at me a little bit because I'm a game developer. Dallas works on games too, but we're kind of the opposite side of the spectrum. If we go to my channel, right, and the title of the video is They Won't Tell You About This Change. And it's really funny because if we just come look at my videos, and we go to my industry tech talk section, I told you about this change in the state of the gaming industry. I told you this change in rendering path optimizations. I told you this change in the video that I covered with Dallas, where he was going over nanite optimization, and I was like, the sad reality is a lot of these newer techs that are being introduced into the UE5 pipeline are centered around virtual production, and they're not really optimal for, lower ninth gen target platforms or lower end cards. And that's just the truth. Nanite and lumen and ray traced global illumination and substrate, the newer material shading, I would even say SM6 to some degree, all of these things are being hammered into this engine because of the Lego and Disney and Weather Channel and ArcViz and all of these corporations that are now leaning on Unreal Engine for real-time rendering. This isn't news to anyone who's been in the industry like me for the last 20 years, that, every game developers conference, like if you were at GDC or you were a member of Unreal Fest over the last 2 years, they have these breakout sessions where they go over kind of what they're wanting to direct Unreal Engine to. But yeah, if you go to the industry tech talks in my channel, you'll see like I've covered this. This was the video that I went over where Dallas was trying to give optimization tips. I don't want to say trying. He was giving optimization tips for nanite and lumen workflows, and people are struggling with performance in nanite, and it's because you can't lean on classical rasterization techniques, and like mass materials have issues, WPO has issues, virtual shadow maps has a new pipeline, but even with all of that, you still have to pay really close attention to your fallback triangles. I don't want to get off into all of that. I've covered that in these videos, but in every single one of these videos in my industry tech talks, I have told you guys over and over again that Unreal Engine is no longer a game engine tool. It is and has been from its incarnation. From, I would even say, from the end of Unreal Engine 4, it has focused on virtual production and Hollywood. In my previous video, that I just covered with Digital Foundry, where they were talking about the current generation graphical state. Is it a letdown? And it's because of all of this upsampling technology that we're needing to use so that we can use a lot of these quote unquote film techniques, but lower the target resolution far enough to where we don't have to have the same type of like GPU workstations that you would use in virtual production. You can run the game with a lot of these bells and whistles, but you're having to do it at a much lower native resolution and then upscale. And the result is a lot of people don't like it. it's blurry. It looks like smeared oil across your screen. There's a lot of artifacting. And you know, DLSS4 and the new FSR, they're working on trying to make that better, but UE5, in all intents and purposes, is not targeting games and isn't focused on games with a lot of the technologies that they've released within the newer engine pipeline. So we'll go back. I do want to let Dallas talk here. I'm going to mute this and let this play because it looks like I'm not going to be able to get through this. But that's kind of the gist of things here. We are at a place in the industry where we're in the middle of a transition. No pun intended on the word that he's going to tell you that they're calling this, but UE5 is no longer just about games. And I will say we need to be really careful here because other major tool sets, ZBrush, Maya, Adobe Suite, they've all attempted to do things like this in some way, shape, or form. They started their life as something and then eventually tried to become something else, or tried to become a hybrid of something else, or started focusing on a different industry. And the goal of a company is always great. That's always nice. Epic changed their licensing model. They were like, you know, and I mean, many says that it's a bait and switch. They got in, they told you it was free. If you weren't in the gaming industry, you know, it was a tool that they wanted you to use. And then, you know, enough people got hooked in on it, and it's like, boom. Okay, if you're not in games, if you're in film, if you're in these industries, there's a license model change as of 5.4. So, you know, a lot of people weren't very happy about it. I would say that just like any company, if you fail to do what you were targeted to do, and you spread yourself too thin, and you do too many things poorly as a result, then it's going to be a failure for you. Hopefully, they'll strike a balance, and Unreal Engine 5 won't be known as Sutter Engine 5 across the globe for gaming, and just end up being some like really successful, you know, short film and Hollywood tool set. And, you know, there's going to be a lot of opinions on this, just like Dallas is about to say. It is what it is. It is happening. I've been telling you about it. People have known about it. Veterans of the industry, you know, a lot of them, if they're on the game, they're concentrated on the game side, and they really like hitting lower end target platforms like the Switch and mobile. They've been a little louder than others, and rightfully so. But I'm going to let this play.
Or may not really be aware of yet, but it's something that is coming, and it's going to have huge implications on not only how you enjoy movies and games, but also what the future of your career in the film or games industry might look like. The shift is known as Transmedia. Now, if this is the first time you're hearing this term, I wouldn't really be surprised. But make no mistake, this concept is going to redefine how we both create and experience media, for better or worse. So, the industry is changing. I work in both film via virtual production and in games, which gives me a unique perspective on the shift. Today, that might be rare, but soon it will be.
Now, here's the thing. If you've been working in Unreal Engine since UE4, you've likely done projects across virtual production or some type of short film or some type of advertisement agency. If you're an artist and you're in Unreal, this is stuff that people have been hiring for the last 5 years. You know, down like they've done 2 UE Fest down in New Orleans, and like the arts has been a major part of that. That's just culturally what it's like down here. I'm from Louisiana, by the way. This isn't anything new, and I would argue that formats like USD, UDS, you know, universal export and import formats like GLTF, like these tools have been used to do this for a very long time. All of the metaverse hype, where they were doing like, digital twins of malls and trying to get these virtual spaces into this place. And then like they would cut to a higher end rendering scene of this and put it into some type of commercial or film. This workflow and this pipeline and this entire area, Mandalorian, movies, the Weather Channel, all of these tools have existed for quite some time. But he is correct in the sense that like you've probably not heard it coined as transmedia.
The norm. And that's why I'm making this video, to give you a head start before you find yourself 10 steps behind in an industry where your skill set could quickly become obsolete. So, what is transmedia? Why is it so important, and why haven't you heard about it? At its core, transmedia is the seamless transfer of assets and creative work between multiple mediums. Sounds simple, but the implications are massive. Now, what...
And again, if this was some brand new thing, then why do they have tool sets dating back all the way to the advent of Unreal Engine 4? Datasmith comes to mind that specialize in this. Like, this has been a thing. This has been a thing for quite some time. Now, it's probably going to be, cloudified or metaversified or, basically shoved into the public perception as this new thing, similar to what we're doing with like ray tracing and dynamic scenes. So they're probably going to try to like mediafy it to some degree to like make you believe that it's this thing that's new, but it's been heading this direction for a while now.
What does this look like? Let's say you have a successful game. It sells well, gains a strong fan base, and naturally it gets adapted into a TV show or movie. Traditionally, this is where it ends. The game is the game, the movie is the movie, maybe some merchandise, but that's really about it. Not anymore. Things are shifting, and largely due to virtual production. Now, when most people hear virtual production, they think of the LED walls. Maybe you picture the Mandalorian or the Batman, but the LED wall is just one small part of virtual production. Virtual production is, first and foremost, a streamlined tool set that allows key creative teams, such as the directors, production designers, cinematographers, and so on, to make major artistic decisions long before filming ever even begins.
And he throws out the fact that game directors are transitioning over to virtual production because the truth is a lot of movie and film industry veterans didn't have these skill sets. So it's not doom and gloom. Like, if you guys have been in the game industry and you're familiar with these tools and you've been working on them or with them for the last 5 to 10 years, it's not like your job is gone. The skill set has shifted in these other areas to where a lot of game directors, game design, lead game designers, and producers are actually finding jobs and career paths in these other markets now. So keep that in mind.
Begins. This saves both time and money, but more importantly in this case, it blurs the line between film and game development due to its real-time pipeline. Enter the Unreal Engine effect. For a long time, virtual production was primarily a pre-production tool. We would create key visuals in Unreal Engine 4, use them to help directors plan their shots, then hand the work off to VFX studios and set designers. But that was before Unreal Engine 5. Now, virtual production vendors are finding that what they create in Engine is actually making it to the final shots more and more. It is no longer seen as just a tool for previs, but for final render, and now much, much more often. Take Megalopolis. The final shots of Megalopolis and the riots in the film at the end were created by a small team of 6, including me, 2 other artists, an animator, engineer, and tech artist, in 2 months, entirely in Unreal Engine 5, and rendered via Path Tracer. What you see at the end and what you're seeing now is entirely Unreal Engine. Now that's a huge shift to what it was not long ago, and this is not happening by accident. Epic Games is actively supporting the merging of film and game pipelines, not just for better tools, but to create a world where assets can seamlessly transition between interactive and cinematic.
And I wouldn't even say they're supporting it. It's been the agenda for a while now. For like just go back and watch Unreal Fest for the last couple of years. It's like 10% games and 80 to 90% virtual production. I actually did a video at last year or the year before's Unreal Fest covering this. They have breakout sessions where you get to ask questions after a lot of this tech is introduced for the first time. And one of the primary concern among game developers was the thing that we're actually going through right now in the ninth gen, where a lot of this tech doesn't seem to be aiming at the target platform. Like ninth gen consoles are struggling with a lot of this newer tech. And during the Q&A, which doesn't get sent into the live feed, the engineer's feedback was the lines will be a little bit blurry, but it's up to developers to educate themselves on what features should or should not be utilized in games. But they're not going to set a hard line for you. They're not going to tell you, you can't sequence something out with path tracing for your game. And to some degree, I agree with that. But at the same time, there needs to be better communication where the line is drawn so that, people that are coming into the engine, because there has been a massive influx across multiple industries coming into UE5 brand new, they don't have a technical background. They are learning. And there is a very, very, very steep learning curve. And I'm not going to say that Epic's documentation completely just sucks, but it doesn't do a very good job of going through, here's your target platform and here are the features that are going to hurt you. It leaves a lot of that to discovery. So that with this influx of new talent coming in and, kind of the job shifting and the target shifting, you're seeing a lot of the ramifications of that, as well as just the massive amounts of changes that have happened with the high end of Unreal Engine 5, as well as the lower end target platforms that the engine just cannot hit very well anymore, where you would really need to probably be going back to UE4. So it's a lot of that happening. The other thing that Dallas doesn't mention here is that the industry has shifted in such a way that people with power, the bigger production studios in Hollywood, and these tool sets becoming more accessible to smaller indie-based studios or smaller short film-based studios, it's upset the industry in a way that the power dynamic has shifted. So that while there's a lot of love for what's happening because it makes it easier for these smaller production studios to get into short film, it's also kind of cannibalized their market to some degree, because the bigger studios that haven't, it's like trying to move an elephant. They haven't adopted as quickly. They look at this as a threat. So there's a huge complex dynamic happening in the industry surrounding all of this.
Medias. It is also no coincidence that increasingly more developers are switching to Unreal Engine, nor is it a mere coincidence that AAA developers increasingly choose to create games that are more linear and narrative focused, as it supports an easier transition into film and TV adaptation.
And yeah, I would agree with him. It's not a coincidence. It's been the rhetoric that's been pumped down these major studios' throats for a really long time. I've subcontracted for billion-dollar Fortune 500 game development studios. I've consulted as a CTO for a billion-dollar industry. These people, and I'm not saying that Epic's marketing team isn't doing their job, because that is their job, but when the C-suites, the CEO to CTO is being told by a company that literally is the head or leads an engine like Unreal and says, this is what our engine is capable of doing. And a lot of these people at the very top of these organizations, I'm not saying all of them, because there are studios where the CTO, CEO has come from a lead engineering background. But a lot of these companies, that's not what they do. They hire business-minded people to run the business. They hire financial-minded people to run financials. and they're being told this is what our engine can do, and they're not technical, and they just put that trust in them, and then they go to the people under them, their leads, and they say, okay, we're using UE5 for everything now because it can do all of this stuff dynamically, and we'll save all of this development time, because that's what's being told to them. And usually it involves someone in a senior level or lead level position fighting against that direction a little bit, and then ultimately having to cave because they want to keep their job. And then a year to 2 years into development, they're like, hey, we have to pivot, we can't hit these targets, it's performing really badly. Well, we're at the end of our budget, you need to make it work. And rinse and repeat that a few times, and that's where we are. And I'm, like it, hate it, love it, whatever. I'm not trying to like sugarcoat anything or feed you false truths. It is just simply facts. The other thing that is simply facts is what Dallas is saying here. I don't have anything to the contrary of what he's trying to tell you. I'm only stating that, like, people like me, veterans of the industry that's been here doing this, we've been shouting this from the rooftops. It's not that no one's telling anyone. We've been saying this, and it hasn't always been a positive. It's been, hey, we see this shift coming. This is what it means, and this is what it's doing on the game development side. Those tools are kind of hurting a little bit. So,
which brings me to the transmedia boom. If you've been paying attention, you've probably noticed a massive surge in game-to-TV adaptations. The Last of Us, Fallout, and Halo are already out. Mass Effect, Red Dead Redemption, Zelda, BioShock, God of War, and so many others are all rumored or in development as well, and more pop up every day. Again, none of this is by coincidence. These are all deliberate choices made to bridge these industries in a way that creates a cycle of content which expedites the development in both industries, reducing both cost and development time. So let's take a look at the Transmedia pipeline. Let's go back to that successful game. It gets greenlit for a show, but now, instead of just licensing the IP and calling it a day, Transmedia changes that workflow. The virtual production team extracts or rebuilds assets from the game for use in the show. Instead of discarding those assets after filming, they hand them back to the game studio. The game studio ingests those upgraded assets into their next game or DLC, speeding up development. This serves multiple purposes. 1. The virtual art department upgrades older game assets into high-quality real-time cinematic assets. 2. Instead of reinventing the wheel, the game studio gets optimized assets for future development. And 3. Large studios streamline their pipeline into Unreal Engine to make this process even smoother. Again, this isn't speculation. These deals are already happening, and I would know because I've been in a lot of these.
The only thing that kind of strikes me as odd is how keen Dallas is on trying to like play this out like it's something new. Movies are in production for years. The Last of Us, Halo, all of the, like, this is nothing new. If you go to AWS's website right now, they have a cloud virtual asset pipeline that many of these studios in render farms have been using for a long time. Fallout, I'm almost for certain, would have used this. Unreal Engine 5 did nothing but try to introduce a technology that made that easier, but the reality is that this has been happening for almost a decade now. We don't have Octane and Cinema 4D and all of these other applications because this didn't exist. The reality is Epic and Unreal are just now entering an industry or caring about an industry that has existed for a long time now. And game crossovers are nothing new. It's no doubt that this would be happening whenever the gaming market and the gaming community base, like the consumer base, is larger at any given moment on the two most top played games on the planet than the attendance of the Super Bowl. Like, just go study the market. Like, gaming has surpassed Hollywood and has been surpassed Hollywood for almost a decade now. These are just all understood, known things for anyone who has paid attention or been in this industry.
these meetings. I've even led some of these discussions, even done some presentations, not really too dissimilar to what I'm giving you guys right now. Now, what does this mean for you? As I continue, I want to split this part into two perspectives. What this means for you as a consumer and what this means for you as a developer or artist. Now, as a consumer, I could easily give the example of a season of a show acting as what happens between sequels of a game, or even acting as promotional material for a sequel. But let's use a more interesting example and use case. Imagine watching a show. Let's say it's based on a live service game, for example. Let's say like Apex Legends or Ark, and one episode or even an entire season takes place in an entirely new environment, somewhere you've never seen before. A few weeks later, you hop into the game, and the exact map just happens to have been added as a playable space. Whereas once you were engaged passively with a show, watching heroes navigate some landscape, now you get to be the hero, maybe even retreading that same path, but making your own choices along the way.
Oh, you mean like they did with Arcane and League? You know, that, by the way, isn't even in Unreal Engine. I mean, I see I see the direction and what's being laid out in front of you. The only thing is that it's the presentation. It's being sold to you like this is only possible with Unreal, or the industry hasn't been moving in this direction without UE5, or it's all, and maybe he's not spinning it as it's all rainbows and unicorns. Yes, from entertainment, it is going to be nice to be a consumer and be able to consume these game crossovers, and it is going to save production companies money to be able to go from a nanite workflow to these higher end assets that are needed for virtual production. And I would just say that, like we've been saying for the longest, like that's the reason why they went this direction. That news is not new. What they're trying to do is not new. This coining the term, throwing the cloud on the internet and servers doesn't mean it's brand new. It's servers in the internet existed long before coining this term. And the same thing with game and video crossovers. It existed, the workflow was there, and tools existed for this long before Transmedia and UE5. That's kind of where I am on this. The reason why there's probably a hint of bitterness in my response or my reaction on this is because I've seen how this has impacted game players, people that like consume gaming, and I've seen how it's impacted game developers, people that are reliant on the tools to be very easy, and, or should I say, a path of least resistance to hit their target platform. And I would argue that UE4 did a better job during its generation than UE5 has done, and that is a side effect of them putting more focus and more priority on the virtual film side, that Disney money and that Lego money.
Way. Now that is transmedia in action. Now, whether you see this as an exciting evolution or a nightmare of corporate synergy doesn't matter. This is the goal, and this is the direction we're all headed towards. Now, as an artist or developer, you might think, I just want to make games. I don't really care about making movies. That also doesn't really matter, nor is that really even the point. However, I will preface this part by saying this whole transmedia stuff will largely just affect AAA and AA developers, as well as, of course, some breakout.
At the end of the day, there are two ways to look at this. Dallas does, again, as someone who is a game developer, the way that he just kind of shuns this off can rub people the wrong way. I will say that be empathetic and understand that multiple industries coming into an engine, while there is growing pains and while there is going to be a tug of war between, two different targets happening, if managed correctly and if balanced, it means really good things for even game developers. The problem is that there's that, it, like this reaction right here. It doesn't really matter how you feel as a game developer. It's not really the point. It's when too many people only care about the targets that they're trying to do with a tool and then someone gets neglected. Someone's, you know, subset or group or tooling gets neglected, and that's where I say that it becomes unhealthy. You can't, like, it's almost like tearing apart the core of what a thing is from the inside, because is there's this feeling or this basically this neglect that's happening somewhere. I'm happy for all of the virtual production people that have come in and the Hollywood people that have come in and UE5 growing as an engine in general. I have been here making games with this for such a long time that it's not very easy for me to sit here and see the direction UE5 has gone and it being labeled as Stutter Engine 5 and having PSO caching issues and everything that's happening as far as performance and people up in arms is on the part of it that was its birth, the thing that Unreal was made to do. And then all of the virtual production pipeline, Hollywood pipeline, all of the people that are coming in new, design and artists, are like on cloud nine, loving it. It's doing exactly what they need to do, etc. That's where I see some problems. But
indies, but to say every small studio, every indie dev will be thrown into this process would just be salacious. So before I continue, I just want to make that point well known. Now, this process largely impacts both film studios and AAA developers. Then, as the industry shifts, film and game studios are merging, or at the very least, creating their own divisions to work across both industries. That means a few things. As an environment artist, you might be asked to design a level, like sets that can function both for gameplay and cinematic use case in movies and shows. As a lighting artist, you'll need to think about both player perspective and film cameras. As a technical artist or engineer, you might be asked to develop tools for both film production and game development. And as a level designer, you won't just be considering gameplay flow, but also how your assets work in a director's point of view in a virtual set. These expectations aren't just coming, they're actually already here in a lot of cases. If you're looking for work in the film or games industry, you'll notice a transition, for example, from the specialist to the generalist. It is no longer enough to simply know how to model, regardless of how good you are, for example. You are expected to model, texture, set dress, light, as well as have some knowledge of cinematic pipelines, for example. There are still a few large studios remaining who have the means to hire specialists, but most listings anymore are just for senior environment artists, lead tech artists, and so on. Again, the expectation that you're...
And here's another thing. I've been in this industry long enough to see that I've talked about this in the State of the Industry talk where I'm like, look at all these massive layoffs. Look at the loss of like specialists. Look at the influx of generalists. Look at them like trying to restructure kind of the expense curve around having more entry level and generalist type of people. And I mean, rightfully so. The technology and the landscape is changing, so it's really hard to find specialists to do a lot of these things anyway. And the hiring structure for a lot of these companies doesn't match the rate of change with technology. So yeah, there's going to be adjustments, but what a lot of people don't mention here is that it usually goes horrifically wrong, and these lead and specialist people end up becoming either subcontracted to step in and fix a disaster, or they're hired and put in charge of these larger generalist teams to do cross training. You got to be really careful there because you're kind of working yourself out of a job as you're training more and more people to do what you know how to do. If you're not in a lead or director's position or in one of the C seats, well, as more and more people possess your skill set, you've kind of made yourself obsolete.
Skill set will facilitate an ever expansive list of demands. We could put part of the blame, in fact, at the recent lack in quality on an array of projects due to this very situation, in fact. As to be truly good at...
And one on him for, like, calling that out. You know, he doesn't... he'll hit points whenever it's time to hit points, and you know he tries to be very non-biased, so I do got to give him respect for that.
Any specific facet of this vocation takes time. So you end up with artists who are actually senior at some things, but junior at others, yet all expected to complete each task at the highest level possible. There is something to be said at the extinction of the junior artist and the value newer artists and developers brought to a project, but that is a topic for another video. The future is transmedia. So the question isn't if this shift will happen, it's how prepared you'll be when it does. Because this isn't a trend. It's a fundamental restructuring of the industry for which the foundation has already been laid. And if you're an artist, developer, or even just someone looking to break in, understanding transmedia could mean the difference between staying ahead or getting left behind. So what does all this mean for the future, and how did we get here? If you follow gaming or movie news, you're well aware of the ongoing decline in both industries. There are plenty of reasons. Some blame declining quality, others point to oversaturation.
It's funny because this thing that he's talking about right now, in my mind, it feels like it's being coined as the savior. And it's funny because you can always say, like, you know, you can walk into a doctor's office and you can say, man, there's always these sick people here. The hospital, excuse me, the hospital is making people sick. The correlation between a problem and its resolution can always be misconstrued or misunderstood. The argument that I would like to say is that while this likely in the future will balance out and the adoption of this pipeline will likely become more efficient, I will say that in my mind, the fact that you have a general engine that was targeted for games and game consoles having an identity crisis, and the majority of the industry coming into the ninth gen right on the cusp of it moving to UE5 and introducing all this new tech, and a lot of gamers looking at the current gen games going, man, it looks like smeared mud. Like, what's going on? I got to do all of this upsampling. You know, it looks even worse than 1080p TAA. Like, what's happening? And people choosing to play older games or stick with Fortnite or like games as a service games. Like, the industry's blown their foot off. No one else but them has done this. Consumer reception is a thing. The people that buy products and buy the things that media produces and lean into those things. The reason why AAA studios are falling like flies and indie studios are not having these said problems is because they're not trying to fly that close to the sun, and they're not as actively involved in the very thing that Dallas is outlining here. They're focused on games. They're trying to target the consumer market that that games have been trying to target, and they put the core ideal philosophy of what a game is into perspective, and they focus on stylization, optimization, and fun. It's the industries that are doing the thing that Dallas is telling you here, this transmedia trend where, you know, the Marvels, the Spider-Mans, the AAA Hollywood studio licensing deals. Just go look at all of the failures that have occurred, and you tell me that that's not the reason. So yeah, don't confuse the results of the thing that's been happening with the so-called quote-unquote solution. Just keep that in mind.
Misguided priorities and politics, but regardless of the cause, one thing is certain: the old ways just simply are not working anymore.
No, the new ways, it could be arguably stated. And the sudden huge push and shift into that new way might not be what's working. Like, really, take a step back, look at it, and you do your research and go dig into this and look at the industry over the last 5 years to 10 years and see the directional shift that we've been moving in, and you ask yourself, is it a result of games trying to be good at being games and being optimized for their target platform? Or has the trash that has come out that consumers rejected played out more like a Hollywood movie and focused on visuals and high fidelity rendering and performed like garbage on your PC and your console, and that's the reason they didn't sell? You ask yourself that question. Be real with yourself, and you'll know the answer. I'm not going to give it to you. I have my opinions, of course. I just know better. But, you know, don't just take what people say at face value.
Gone are the days when DVD sales could prop up a film studio, when game journalists dictated public perception, or when the AAA label was a guarantee of quality. The industry has to evolve, and Transmedia is their answer. By creating expansive, interconnected worlds that exist across multiple forms of media, games, TV, film, comics, books, studios, and
And just like that last sentence that he said is just, if, for me, for someone who's looking at this through a microphone, like a magnifying glass, it's almost like when you go to the doctor and he gives you medicine and it's not working, and then they say, okay, we're gonna double down on the medicine. Like, that's what it sounded like. It's like, hey, we've been shifting to this realm, we've been trying this, we've been really pushing linear Hollywood based, high fidelity, film based games, and in the AAA studio and AAA market, and it hasn't been working. We're failing. Like, obviously the market's in turmoil right now, and gamers aren't buying this garbage. And it's like, transmedia is the answer. Like, really? Like, I'm sorry, I just find that really funny.
publishers hope to reinvigorate engagement and redefine success. Whether they pull it off or not is another question entirely, but one thing's for sure: this shift is already happening, and it's going to shape the future of entertainment as we know it. Again, whether agree or disagree doesn't really matter. What matters will be how the consumer base responds to this, and if
Very true. That is what's going to matter.
you're an artist or developer looking to break into the industry or already here, it will merely be a question of adapting to shifting trends in the industry, which, if you're a veteran, let's be honest, that's nothing really new for us anyway. Now, that's all I have for today. If this video left you with more questions than answers, feel free to join the Discord. Link in the
Anyway, I hope this has been helpful to you guys. I hope that I've touched on anything that is just kind of like, if you had question marks going off in your mind or something didn't seem quite right, I gave you a little bit of a different perspective on this. I love Dallas. I could tell, like, I mean, he's not shy about his creds. He's heavily on the virtual production side. And you're going to have people looking at this from all kinds of different perspectives. And I wanted to give you a game engineering perspective, someone who's been programming for 20 years now, like someone who is running a studio that subcontracts and hires their own staff and has, gone to market with games and struggles to hit, target platforms ranging from VR to mobile to consoles and PC. Like, it is what it is, For everyone out there who is a member of the Wild Ox Studios Patreon, I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you're a member of the Wild Ox Studios YouTube family, or you aren't, consider slapping that join button. It really does incentivize me to keep making videos like this. For everybody over in the Wild Ox Studios Discord, what's up? I see you. Until next time, happy developing, and toodles, guys. Hit that like and subscribe.